Well, hi there and welcome. I'm Nas and I'm a bookworm. I have always been a bookworm. I absolutely love books. Now, if you are someone who is an ESL student, you are learning English as your second language and you've tried reading, but you haven't fallen in love with it, well, I have an experiment here. I want to try this book club where I help you and guide you through some of the books or some of the short stories that I really love reading. I really enjoy reading. And what I want to try to do here is help you to understand without reaching for your dictionary every 2 minutes. I think that's the reason you don't love reading yet. It's the reason why you haven't fallen in love with reading yet. But let's see if I can change your mind. And if at any point during this video, during this podcast, you like what I'm saying, you are enjoying yourself, okay, then please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And also, I really would appreciate suggestions on the types of books that you would like me to read, any short stories you come across. But enough chit chat, let's get down to what I love most, which is reading. And today we're going to read a short excerpt from Matilda by Roald Dahl. And the reason I chose this is because it explains the beauty of reading. Why do some of us fall in love with reading, and why do I want you to become a bookworm? All right, so let's start. The books transported her into new worlds and introduced her to amazing people who lived exciting lives. She went on olden day sailing ships with Joseph Conrad. She went to Africa with Ernest Hemingway and to India with Rudyard Kipling. She traveled all over the world while sitting in her little room in an English village. So, what this means is that she was just in her little room in an English village, very ordinary life maybe, but she was able to travel without getting on a plane, without getting onto a train, without getting onto a ship, all right? And how did she do this? Through the books, through words, and that's the beauty of reading. So she read books by Joseph Conrad. And so she felt like she was sailing. And she read books by Hemingway. And so through his books, she traveled in her mind to Africa. And then with Rudyard Kipling, she went on adventures in India. Matilda had long ago discovered that without a book, life was like a desert, dry and empty. She felt as though the pages were magic portals, opening up to take her to places she could never visit otherwise. She could be a fearless adventurer, an intrepid detective, or even a queen. The possibilities were endless, and she loved every second of it. So these books, these pages, these words were like gateways, portals, escapes into different worlds. She could travel to places that she couldn't visit otherwise. Maybe she was trapped in her little space. She couldn't go anywhere, but when she opened the book, she became an adventurer. She became a detective. She became a queen. She became whatever the hero or heroine in the book was. The possibilities were endless, and she loved every second of it. And this is the reason I read, because this is really what happens to you when you fall in love with reading. It's an escape. And like she says, it is the most fascinating thing in the world, Matilda said to herself as she walked home one afternoon. It really is amazing how books can take you away from your own reality, transport you to other places, and fill you with joy and wonder. Now, this is so important if your reality is not good. Maybe you are someone who is trapped in an unhappy life. Maybe you are trapped physically in a prison somewhere. Maybe you are a hostage. I don't know. Anything where your reality is not pleasant. Well, when you open a book, That book takes you away from that ugly reality. It's an escape. It transports you. It takes you to other places, and it fills you with joy and wonder. It's honestly how I feel about reading. Her family, however, did not share her enthusiasm. Her family were not readers. They didn't understand what this excitement about books was all about. The Wormwoods thought books were a waste of time. Her father, who spent his days selling shoddy cars and bragging about his crooked deals, scoffed at her love of reading. So the father was a car salesman. He sold shoddy cars, not good quality, okay? And he bragged, he showed off about his crooked deals. He was not an honest man. His deals were crooked. They were not honest. They were not straightforward. He scoffed, he laughed, he mocked her love of reading. Her mother preferred to spend her afternoons playing bingo or watching television. Why on earth would you want to read when you can watch the telly? The telly is the television, Mrs. Wormwood would say, shaking her head in disbelief. She could not understand Matilda. But Matilda ignored them. She had something they would never understand, the power of her imagination. When she read, she was no longer the lonely little girl in a family that didn't care about her. So now we understand what Matilda's reality was. She was a child in a family that wasn't really that great, right? So when she read, she became someone else entirely, stepping into the shoes of characters who faced challenges, overcame obstacles, and found their own strength. So she stepped into the shoes of the characters. She became the characters. She often visited the small public library in the village, a haven filled with shelves stacked to the ceiling with books of every kind. The kindly librarian, Mrs. Phelps, quickly grew fond of her, amazed at the amount Matilda read. "You finished another one already?" Mrs. Phelps asked one day, when Matilda returned a large, leather-bound copy of Great Expectations. "Oh, yes," Matilda replied with a smile. "It was wonderful. I loved Pip, though I didn't much like Estella. She was so cruel to him. Look how she becomes involved in the story. She loves certain characters and she hates others." Mrs. Phelps chuckled. "You've got sharp insight for someone so young," she said. "I think you're going to be quite the writer or scholar someday, Matilda. Quite the writer, a very good writer, or even a scholar." And Matilda shrugged shyly. But the idea of becoming a writer thrilled her. She had so many stories in her head, worlds she wanted to create, characters she wanted to bring to life. So bring it to life, making it a reality, even if it's only in a book on pages. Reading had opened her mind to endless possibilities. Anything was possible. She carried these thoughts with her as she walked back to her small house that day. The house seemed dull compared to the adventures she had experienced in her books. But Matilda didn't mind. She had her imagination to keep her company, and with a book in her hands, she knew she would never truly be alone. Now, this is wonderful because this really does encapsulate, it summarizes the beauty of books and reading, and I hope that you honestly do fall in love with reading and become bookworms. Right, so what do we learn from this reading? Well, Matilda uses books as an escape from her neglectful family. Her father who scoffs at her, her father who sells shoddy cars, her mother who just wants to binge watch television all day. She watches the telly, she plays bingo. Now, we're going to talk about how literature is a source of comfort and empowerment for her. Well, she feels less lonely, and she also feels strong because she steps into the shoes of the characters, right? She becomes the characters. She can be anyone. The possibilities are endless. And now we're going to talk about the idea that books act as portals, offering readers the ability to live multiple lives and see the world through different perspectives. Now think about this. How is this universal? How is it true for all readers, not just Matilda? Well, let me share my thoughts about this. So, as a reader, you become the character. You experience what the character is experiencing, the highs, the lows, the fears, the excitement. By reading a book, I become that character. If I read 100 books, I become 100 different people. And each character has a different outlook, a different perspective. They see the world differently. And I'm going to say that this is universal for all readers, not just in English, in any language. Now, we're going to talk about books as an escape from difficult situations. So it's clear from this excerpt that Matilda's home life is bleak. It's not happy. It's not happy. She's got the father who's this salesman, shoddy car salesman, her mother who is more interested in bingo and the telly. So her life is not great, but her imagination keeps her positive, keeps her resilient, keeps her going. And I think for many people, this contrast between a dull reality or a sad reality and your vibrant imagination is why so many people read. Now, I have an interesting story here. So, during COVID lockdown, I had to have an operation. And it was very last minute. It was an emergency operation. I live in a different country because of the COVID restrictions. Nobody could fly over. So, of course, I went into theater alone. So, before going into surgery, I remember sitting and waiting. And instead of being stressed by my reality, I had my Kindle with me and I started reading a book. And it allowed me to escape from the reality or the stress or maybe even any fear that I wasn't really talking about. But reading just helped me to escape. It distracted me. I became the characters in the books. I forgot that I was sitting in a hospital somewhere waiting to be operated on. And so I do think that reading is an escape. I mean, if you think about someone who is a prisoner. So I'm from South Africa. Nelson Mandela was a political prisoner, and he spent a lot of his time reading, because when you read, you escape your reality. You are no longer surrounded by the bars, by the cage. You are free. And we're going to talk about how books help readers like Matilda process emotions, solve problems, and develop strength in the face of adversity. Well, here I would say that when you read a book and the character is going through something that maybe you have been through, maybe you are going through, you connect. It resonates with you. You're like, oh, wow, I'm not the only person in the world who is going through this. There are other people who are experiencing the same problems, people who are going through these same emotions. And look how they have survived this adversity, how they've become strong. And if they can do it, well, yes, so can I. So it's almost like having a support system, right? And this one's interesting. Matilda is determined to seek knowledge despite her family's disdain. And we know that they were disdainful because the father scoffed. He mocked at her. She's just reading a book, right? But her determination to seek knowledge is so inspiring. And I think that's why I liked this excerpt to start off our book club, because it encourages readers like yourself to value books, to see this as an escape. And I really do love that idea. Okay, so that's today's very short excerpt, the first step in our book club. And I basically chose it because I think it's the reason why I read, it's the reason why Matilda reads, and it's the reason why you should read. And reading in English doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be tiring, because someone said this to me. They feel exhausted after reading for an hour. And I think it's mostly because you feel a bit of stress. I don't understand. I'm not sure if I read this correctly. I need a dictionary. I need to find out what this word means. Well, together, we're going to read together. I'm going to explain it to you. I'm also going to share my thoughts. And it would be amazing if you shared your thoughts also in the comments section. And have you hit that like button yet? I hope so. I really do. And if you haven't, maybe it's time to do it now. And also subscribe so that you don't miss out on another episode in this channel. We are going to dive into short stories, so stay tuned. I'm Nas. I'm a bookworm. Ciao.